Everyone dreams of living an uncommon life, and the best asset you have to achieve your dreams is you. Welcome to the Uncommon Wealth Podcast. We're going to introduce you to people who are living uncommonly. We're also going to give you some tools and strategies for building wealth and for pursuing an uncommon path that is uniquely right for you.
Hello and welcome everybody to Uncommon Wealth Podcast. I love that intro music. You know what we have today? We have a 3-person podcast. We have myself, Brian Dewhurst. Hello.
Hola, ¿cómo estás? This is Brian Dewhurst.
And the one and only Aaron Kramer. We have 3 of us. Hello, Aaron.
Yeah. Hello, my name is Aaron.
Yep. And you know what we're going to do today? We're going to talk a little bit about taxes. What have they done historically? What are they going to do in the future? And why should we care? Where do we start out? We have a document, an attachment for this that we're going to kind of be going over. But all we're trying to say in this whole podcast is it matters. And where have we been historically? Where are we at now? And where do we think? Obviously, we're kind of projecting a little bit. Nothing that we should say right now. Caveat. Risk compliance, you know what I'm saying. So
yeah, we are not tax advisors and we are not giving tax advice.
That's Brian keeps me out of jail. I appreciate that. So where do you guys want to start? And then I think I'll be kind of litmus test. If I start falling asleep, I'll be like, pull off. We're going too deep. Okay. That's my job.
I can start so this is like a fascinating thing to me. When I was reading Ed Slott's book, this is where we kind of got this from. I'm a visual learner, and seeing what we're going to put there in the notes here, if you do go out and look at it, it really opened my eyes to where the top federal income tax brackets were and where we're at now, and how long they've been there. And it's kind of scary.
What this document looks like when you look at it is just the year. It goes 1913, and then what the top federal income tax bracket is. And then it just goes year by year until today. So that's what we're looking at. And so I'd love to quickly, just for those who don't understand how the tax code works, it's tiered. Brian, tell us how it is and why we're talking about the top tier.
Yeah, it's progressive is kind of the word I think most associated with the tax code. Very similar to tiered, but you'd probably either tiered or progressive. So, 0 to whatever the first tranche is like no taxes. And then the next tranche is like 10 to 15% taxes. I'm not going to go through the actual code because it changes all the time, but
right.
Basically the marginal rate with which you pay taxes as your income goes up, it goes up.
Right. And so if you make only $6,000 a year, you're probably not going to get taxed on that.
Right.
But then if you get paid more,
if you're making $600,000 a year, then that income that's coming in, that last dollar is coming in at the highest bracket.
And that $600 one is getting taxed different than the $25,000 mark. So that's why it's progressive is the real world. Thanks for correcting me.
That was
so. I think the important thing to note, or I guess that I want to get out there since I identify as a libertarian, but is the fact that our country was founded in 1776 and there was no taxes until 1913. That to me is also an interesting part of the story. And the tax code was put into place on Christmas Eve in 1913 with the Income Tax Act, along with co-legislation for the Federal Reserve Act. So our country materially changed in 1913, and it's never gone back for the Fed controlling the money supply or for us paying federal income taxes on our labor and wages. So
gotta love it. Okay, Aaron, where do we start, buddy? Kick us off.
My thing is, when you're looking at this, it's seriously, when we look at this graph, starting in 1944 all the way to 1963, our top federal income bracket was in the 90 percentile. So I know if you're a listener here, and like even myself, I'm like, well, I'm not in the top bracket, so I don't really care. But remember how Philip and Brian just said it's progressive. So that means I probably would have been in like 30 or 50, or I don't know how they would have done that, but like would have been a much higher tax bracket because it goes up. So you don't just jump from being what you're in now to like 90. So that means
Man.
When we're looking at it, and I know a lot, I talked to some people about this, and they were saying like, well, a lot of this followed like World War II and the wars and stuff that we had to pay for, which is true. But also, we just have gone through some funky times these past couple of years. We've printed more money than we've ever printed in history in these past 2 years. Mm-hmm. So the potential for taxes to go up, I mean, it's there.
I don't think it's a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Right. But let's just quickly just understand this. Like, the highest it goes up to is 94%. Could you imagine what your mind would be thinking? If I make over this, 94% of it is gone. I mean, think about that, what that does mentally to you. Like, what's the point? Like,
yeah.
Right? It just kind of like totally like demoralizes you from even trying to be creative or trying to push the envelope. Not saying that money is the incentive for everything, but if you're getting 94% taken away, it changes your mindset a little bit, right?
Yeah,
sure.
When you think about I think our current, don't hold me to this, I don't have it looking at, I think once you're making like $350,000 or something like that, you're in the top tax bracket right now.
Okay.
So,
yeah, 350 to 440, I believe, if you're married, filing jointly.
Right, depending.
Yeah, that's not like you're not even in the 1%.
Right.
So, for listeners out there, think like, I mean, we're not saying like, yeah, if you're making billions of dollars and you're going to get taken, 94% of it, like, I mean, whatever. But like, you're only making, I say it only, but like, you're not some big making millions a year, $300 and something thousand a year, and they're going to take 94% of it.
Right. And you could just see, because I can almost hear myself thinking like, okay, what can I do to avoid that? Right.
Yeah.
If like how many things or how many people do I have to surround myself with to help me avoid paying 90% in taxes? It's interesting. Right?
Yeah. And I don't think this chart has the federal Medicare surcharge tax added in, because I think it's actually higher than 37%. So let's just say it's 40 as of today, if you count the Medicare surcharge tax. But
what is that for our listeners, Brian?
It's the tax that was basically added through Obamacare to, further offset the cost of the legislation to be passed. So it's just another tax to help pay for Obamacare.
Okay.
And Medicare benefits and stuff like that.
All right.
So, I mean, that's my understanding of it. But I think the important thing that we're trying to get at is your labor and your wages are taxed at a healthy rate, whether you think that's high or low. Historically, it seems low, but I think now more than ever, like what you were saying, Aaron, more people are in these higher brackets than there were 50, 60, 70 years ago, for sure. Mm-hmm. And when you look at potentially making gains on your assets, like real estate, stocks, bonds, whatever, you have to do that, or you should be thinking about how to do that in a tax-deferred way or tax-sheltered way. And so that you're not adding to your tax liability with your investment strategy.
Yeah. And the other thing to start thinking about, though, work with your financial advisor or somebody, is that, it's like we use ourselves, for example, we're all fairly young. We get to like retirement age that we put all this money into an IRA. It's tax sheltered. That's great. But it was tax sheltered from our lower taxes today. And then you get to retirement, and then now taxes have gone up since then.
That's a good point. That's a great point.
And now we go to pull it out, and let's say we're at 50% tax bracket, and now that has now been hit by, it's only worth half because you're going to give half of it to the government. So there are strategies to do to help like convert that, or not convert that, that's a bad word. Mitigate that risk.
Yeah, mitigate that risk for sure. All right. Let's talk about this for a second, because you mentioned old Ed Slott at first. And both, Brian and you, Aaron, have studied and read books. We all get, if you've heard this show before, probably not me, but I'm grateful I have smart people around me. Tell the listeners he's done a lot of research. I'll just say that. And we pull a lot of information from him. So let's talk about quick Ed Slott. What is different about him? What is he trying to prove or trying to help people with? Let's talk about that quick. And then also know that both Brian and Aaron have studied some of his stuff. Brian, you've gone in depth just recently with the class, and I know that you were like, it was like drinking from a fire hose. So.
Yeah. I can go. Brian can like tip it off since he went to the class, so he knows more than I do. But I've just read his books. He is the leading CPA on IRAs. So he kind of just really helps financial advisors, tax experts, and estate attorneys understand the ins and outs of taxes when we're looking at like some of our biggest wealth vehicles, which tends to be our IRAs. So he helps us how to learn or teach us how we can like make those as tax proficient as possible.
Yeah, and I think I go back to legislation. The IRA and all of that was created in the 70s after Wall Street raided corporate pensions, and kind of in the 70s and 80s, they'd go in and buy out all these companies and then ransack the pension because it made the company instantly more profitable and they'd sell it. And so they needed a vehicle to pass the liability of retirement on because they were essentially eliminating it. So that's really where the 401k, and the IRA, and the ERISA legislation started, was the need to replace the company pension. And all of this, the unintended consequences of all of these rules. And there's been a lot of rule changes in the last 2 years with COVID, with the CARES Act. And so a lot of the class was on all these, I would say maybe a little bit more edge cases of, situations that happen in life, and because of all these nuances of this legislation that's been passed, like what you thought was going to happen is not what's happening now. And so Ed also provides a community to stay on top of all this stuff, because it changes actually quite a bit. Like, for example, they've just made a massive change to, beneficiary IRAs and withdrawal, like the order in which you have to take your money out and how quickly you have to take it out. They've changed the required minimum distribution age from 70.5 to 72. They're talking about moving to 75 or eliminating it, which is interesting. And so there's just all these things that are very challenging to stay on top of, if you're just a retired person trying to manage this stuff yourself, and you have, some of these kind of edge cases or nuances that, you may break a rule or fall into a better strategy unknowingly, just because of life.
Right.
So that's a big part of what Ed Slott's community is too, is just the constant continuing education around all this stuff and the way it changes.
That's good. So from a tax perspective, what you guys are saying is historically we're fairly at a lower rate than normal. Is that what I'm hearing? Did I hear that correct? And you both are saying like all signs are pointing that these things are probably going to go up. So if you are putting your money into an account that's going to get taxed in the future, it might be something you want to think about today. So what is one action item that people can do if they have found themselves in this exact situation?
So I know like the one thing for younger clients, if you're, 10 years out from retirement, 5 years out from retirement, is start doing Roth conversions if it works out for you. Again, you got to make sure you talk to a financial professional. I'm not saying it works for everybody, but
Yep.
That's one way to do it. So you can ensure that like you're not going to pay taxes on that in retirement. You're going to pay taxes on it up front for whatever you convert, but you're paying on the taxes of the tax rate you're in right now prior to them possibly raising those rates, which then decreases the value of that IRA.
Yeah. And we've seen that Roth conversion work the best when you are actually getting a tax return at the end of the year, and you use that tax return to then pay taxes on the conversion. That's where we've seen that work really powerfully. So that's just another thing you can talk to your professional and say, hey, would this work in my situation? Right.
Yeah. And to do that most effectively, I think Aaron's done a great job of this, is you've really got to dial in your tax liability in the current year
early. Yeah.
Yeah. Like October through December and really baking that in of what you're going to owe. And like if you have a $4,000 refund coming in April, you can do a Roth conversion in November, December against that, because a Roth conversion triggers tax, and the tax can't come from the IRA. It has to come from your, out of pocket money, cash, bank money. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to get $4 or $5 grand back from the government, we can essentially Roth convert against that and bring your refund to zero, but then shift those IRA dollars into Roth dollars. So, but you really, to really get good at that, you have to have your taxes ready to go in November, December. So we can estimate that with your accountant.
Yeah. Another reason why
I would say the other strategy is just on the non-qualified is, I think a lot of people are maxing out their IRA, 401k, Roth capabilities, and they're saying, hey, I still have, whatever, $1,000 to $5,000 a month I could be saving between, my spouse and I. Where and how do we put that? And so that's really where we're focusing on, either tax managed strategies, like if you're in a brokerage account, trying to grow that money without triggering capital gains tax, or, municipal bonds. Now that interest rates are higher, are looking more attractive. That interest is federally tax free and probably partially state tax free. It's hard to buy all municipals in just one state, but largely federally tax free, mostly state tax free. Obviously, the life insurance is a tax sheltered asset class. And so, trying to build wealth in those ways. And then obviously, if you're incorporating real estate, that has its own potential tax advantages, deductions, and that type of thing that can carry forward to your return as well.
Right. And I think that's why our philosophy at Uncommon Wealth
stuff.
Yeah, is always really powerful, because
it's interesting to me what kind of we run into just a lot of people, and it's just amazing to me how many people are trying to trade, got a Robinhood account, E-Trade account. And I'm not, saying not to do that. It's just amazing to me how many people are doing it. And it's just if you actually make money at that, you're going to pay tax immediately. At the, I think the short-term bracket now in cap gains is 28%. That's also stacking onto your personal return. So, based on that progressive tax bracket thing, we kind of talked about at the beginning, it can really impact your tax liability, especially if you're making over, 6 figures for you and your spouse. So, that's the kind of money that if you don't have a legitimate trading system and you're just kind of following message boards and doing random things, that's not a system to build wealth over time. You could certainly get lucky, and a lot of people had. But in terms of building a wealth generating system of dollar cost averaging into strategic asset classes to mitigate tax, build wealth, and maintain your liquidity. Liquidity just means access to your money. That's where I think a lot more people could be very strategic with those dollars and grow wealth much faster if they had a concrete strategy with those funds, as opposed to just I follow Wall Street Bets or somebody, I made a trade, or I'm trading this. And the problem with trading is you have to continue to be right. And that's a daunting task when you and your spouse have full-time jobs, kids, all that type of stuff. So the people I feel are successful at trading, it's their full-time job. They've quit their job, they're trading their own money, they're managing their taxes, and that is their long-term strategy. And that's a very select few of people that are doing that successfully. So
it takes a lot to be that person. You have to emotionally be able to handle your money
mortgage
in a
with
way that
generating money from, because
that's a whole different ball game.
Backwards on the stock chart, it's I should have done this, should have done that. When you look forwards, it's blank. It's a blank page. And, to cross that chasm is a whole different thing. And so I do think there's a very big benefit to building wealth by owning stocks and investing in stocks in the long term. Obviously, we have stalwarts like Warren Buffett to look at for that. But to do that from a tax perspective now, it used to be easy to do that in an after-tax brokerage account. Now, if you're a higher income earner and you're triggering capital gains often, it can be very detrimental. So shifting
really eat up those gains.
Yeah, and shifting the individual stock portfolio to a Roth is the more strategic play. I think some should look at, depending on where their income levels are at. So anyways, I think that's a lot we've covered.
Yeah, it's a lot. And that's why I think our philosophy.
And it's just the other thing I'd say is like every
nobody
person's
can hear me
situation is different. Like where their income's coming from, where their bracket's at, like where their money's at. Like it's interesting to me.
Oh, dude,
how different a lot of people's situations are.
What's happening?
There really isn't one cookie cutter system for one person. So, like that's where my biggest thing comes in. Where you hear a lot of people out there on the internet telling you what to do. I want to make it very clear that that's not us. We're not telling you what to do. It's just it's ideas of what to think about, because everyone, your neighbor in the same neighborhood could have same job as you and your spouse. And when you sit down, they have a completely different goals, situation, background, which could totally change what they need for retirement than what you need for retirement, or just in general.
Yeah, definitely. So I think we hit that well. I think we've lost Philip's microphone. So bring us out. If you have questions or want to go over your individual plan, obviously you can reach out to us at www.uncommonwealth.com. Also, if you're making any type of serious money, please start working with an accountant or a CPA. It's just critical. And especially if you own a business or an entrepreneur, there's just a lot of nuance to the tax code now. And if that's not your full-time job, don't try to make it your full-time job. So surrounding yourself with a team, like a wealth protection team or a wealth freedom team, financial freedom team, we'd love to be a part of that. This has been Brian Dewhurst on the Uncommon Wealth Podcast.
And Aaron Kramer.
And Philip Ramsey.
And we sign off for Philip. So thanks for listening, and everybody go be uncommon.
That's all for this episode, brought to you by Uncommon Wealth Partners. Be sure to visit uncommonwealth.com to learn more about our services. Don't miss an episode as we introduce you to inspiring people who are actively pursuing an uncommon life.